Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming along this beautiful November evening. My name is Gavin Freegard, and I'm the administrator of the Orwell Prize, Britain's most prestigious prize for political writing. Every year we award prizes for the book, the journalism, and for the blog, which comes closest to George Orwell's ambition to make political writing into an art. But we try to do and want to do an awful lot more than that. We want to try and inspire people with political discussion about literature, and also, of course, about Orwell. And we're particularly thrilled to be here at our friends and neighbours, the Travel Bookshop, tonight for our first event, which is, of course, on Orwell and Russia. Russia was clearly incredibly influential on Orwell and his work. Although his interest in it dates a lot sooner than this, homage to Catalonia and his experience of fighting in the Spanish Civil War is instrumental. It's a turning point for him. He and his wife Eileen were able to escape to France just before they would have been arrested by the communists. And one of their friends, Sir Richard Rees, said that when he saw Eileen, he could see in her for the first time the effect that political terror could have on somebody. Orwell's interest in Soviet Russia, of course, is expressed in Homage to Catalonia, but also in Animal Farm and 1984. But Orwell and Russia isn't just about the writer and his intentions. It's about future readers and how they have used and interpreted the work. And we're delighted to give you two incredibly distinguished people to talk about the afterlife, as it were, of Orwell and Russia tonight. On my left is Masha Karp. As well as being a journalist who's worked for the BBC, for Open Democracy, The Common Review and Standpoint magazine, amongst many others, she is a translator of authors including W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, Virginia Woolf, and of course George Orwell. And if I just reach over here, you can see her translation of Animal Farm. So if any of you do speak Russian, you're very welcome to buy a copy of this evening. And on my right, we have the distinguished journalist John Lloyd, who is a contributing editor of the Financial Times, where he also founded the FT Weekend magazine and worked as industrial editor, labour editor, East European editor, and Moscow bureau chief. He also wrote a book on Russia in 1998 called The Rebirth of a Nation, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Glad I got that right. John's also the director of journalism at the Reuters Institute at the University of Oxford and has written widely on the media. So I think between them they're going to cover an awful lot of bases tonight. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm not going to detain you any further. So to begin, I'm going to hand over to Masha.
Thank you. Thank you, Gavin. And thanks for inviting me for this evening, because I think it is really one of the most interesting topics. I'm going to speak a bit about the perception of Orwell behind the Iron Curtain, about the translations of Orwell into Russian, and probably in the end we'll get together to quite an interesting question of how Orwell can help with understanding Russia today, because I think there is a connection, obviously. But first I wanted to start with my own experience of reading Orwell in, I think, probably 1982 or somewhere at the beginning of the 80s, when, of course, everybody who managed to get hold of the book, because the books were not easily available or not available at all, was absolutely sure that Orwell wrote this book about us. And the main question that people kept asking was, how did he know? How did he know? Has he been to the Soviet Union? Because it was partially so with the Animal Farm, because there he obviously describes all the stages of the failed revolution, of the rewriting of history, of the complete transformation of society, but still preserving the myth of the success of the revolution. But it was even more so with 1984, because there, apart from all the well-known and important discoveries of the Big Brother and Doublethink and Crime Thought and all that, what struck us most was how he felt the state of somebody who lives in a totalitarian society. Even the very beginning of the book of 1984, with the smell of cabbage in the stairwell and the lift not working and the everyday objects suddenly disappearing. If you remember, Winston can't find a razor blade to shave himself, and you never knew what object would disappear because it all happened sporadically, and then all the shops could have razor blades in 2 months' time, but not when you needed to shave yourself. So how did he know? I've been asking this question myself ever since. I mean, partially, of course, as Gavin has mentioned, he had experience of the communists in Spain, but that was mostly terror. Secondly, he was disgusted by the lies that English intellectuals repeated at this time about Spain, the lies that were perpetrated by the communists, that were spread by the communists. Thirdly, I think he must have learned something from Arthur Koestler, because he was friends with him when Koestler came to this country during the war. In 1945, they met each other quite often as friends, and Koestler, first, he had been in Russia himself. In 1932, he spent the whole year in Russia. And secondly, he had friends, Austrian communists, who lived in Kharkov, when the place where Koestler visited. But later on, they were arrested, they got to the Gulag, but later they miraculously managed to escape. Koestler's own writing, like Death at Noon, Darkness at Noon, sorry, Darkness at Noon, was obviously influenced by this experience. But that's my guess, but I think they must have discussed it in the mid-40s. And also I think there might have been also some influence of Russian emigres, particular Gleb Struve, the man who co-authored the first translation of Animal Farm. So these are, but also I think probably the main thing was Orwell's own genius of understanding how a man can feel with, to quote from 1984, the boots stamping on a human face. I think this perception of it comes really from his deep psychological and political understanding of the system.